The clink of silverware echoed through the room like judgment. It was always the same. The dining room was dim, but clean, with the ticking of a wall clock filling the space between bites. Lydia sat at the far corner, back straight, hands folded neatly in her lap like she'd been trained. In front of her, a plate, if you could even call it that, dry toast, a scoop of boiled cabbage, grayish-green, soggy, and still steaming. No butter, no seasoning, no drink. No acknowledgement. And then there was Cassidy. Her plate glistened like a magazine cover. A filet mignon cooked medium rare, the juices still warm. Mashed potatoes sculpted with ridges and swirls like soft ivory ribbons. Steamed asparagus lined in perfect order. And a glass bowl of peach slices resting in ice cubes like royalty. Lydia looked down at her own food again, then over at her sister's. They shared the same blood, the same house, the same last name. But nothing else felt shared. She glanced up cautiously, searching her mother's face, hoping for some kind of explanation. Her mother didn't look angry. She didn't look guilty. She looked efficient, like this was routine. "Cassidy needs the energy," her mother said matter-of-factly. You're just you." That sentence would haunt Lydia for years, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. There was no hate in her tone, no raised voice. It was quiet, calculated, dismissive, like Lydia was a product that didn't meet the standard, like she was an afterthought on the grocery list of life. At 9 years old, Lydia didn't yet have the words for neglect, but she felt it in every bite she didn't take, every calorie she didn't get, every time Cassidy reached for her second helping while Lydia sat hungry, silent, and small. She learned early that some children are cherished. Others are simply fed enough not to die. At first, Lydia thought it was temporary. She told herself maybe Mom was tired that night, maybe Cassidy had a rough day, maybe tomorrow the plates would be equal. Maybe she just had to be patient. But tomorrow never came. Instead, a pattern formed, quiet, consistent, cruel. Cassidy always ate first. Cassidy always got the front seat. Cassidy got birthday parties with decorations, candles, gifts, cameras. Lydia, she got a soft, happy birthday mumbled during breakfast. Sometimes not even that. There was a jar on the fridge labeled Cassidy's College Fund. No jar for Lydia. There were family pictures on the wall, all 4 of them, smiling at the beach. Except Lydia wasn't in the frame. She remembered being there. She even remembered holding the camera. That was the first time Lydia truly felt it. Not hated, not resented, just invisible. And that was almost worse. Because when you're hated, you still matter. But when you're forgotten, you begin to forget yourself. So Lydia learned to stop asking. She stopped questioning why Cassidy's room had fairy lights and a canopy bed while hers had peeling paint and a broken lamp. She stopped asking why Cassidy got new shoes every season while she outgrew hers in silence. She told herself, if I don't make noise, maybe they'll leave me alone. And they did. Too well. It was steak again. Lydia smelled it before she even opened the front door, that buttery, seared scent that made her stomach twist with hunger and something colder, shame. She hadn't eaten since lunch. Correction, she hadn't really eaten since yesterday. The house was quiet except for the clatter of Cassidy's fork. She was already at the table, laughing at a video on her phone, a glass of soda sweating beside her. Lydia stepped into the kitchen. There it was, her plate. A slice of plain white bread. One. Not toasted, not buttered, just there. A smear of mayo curled at the edge like a bad joke. She stared at it. Then she looked up at her dad standing by the sink, arms crossed, not saying a word. "Why?" she said quietly. "Why do I only get bread?" Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. Cassidy snorted. "Maybe 'cause you look like a wet rat," she said between bites of steak. Lydia blinked. Her dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask her to leave. He didn't even look mad. He just moved. One step, then another. He reached into the junk drawer, pulled out something heavy, the hammer, rusted, familiar. Lydia barely had time to speak when he grabbed her wrist, slammed her hand flat on the countertop. "You ask that with your tone?" he said, calm, deadly calm. Then came the sound. Crack. She heard it before she felt it. The sound of bone, her bone, splitting. Then came the pain, late but vicious. She screamed. "Ask again," he whispered into her ear. "Go ahead, I dare you." Another crack. Her fingers bent in the wrong direction. Her body dropped to the floor. Her breath caught in her throat like glass. Cassidy kept chewing. Her mother didn't flinch. And Lydia, she didn't pass out. She stayed awake for every second of it. That was the night her bones broke. But it wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that no one would help her. And no one did. They didn't take her to the hospital. They didn't even give her ice. Instead, they shoved Lydia down the basement stairs like a bag of laundry and locked the door behind her. It was cold, damp, reeking of old paint, rusted tools, and forgotten boxes. She sat there curled against a wall, her fingers broken and pulsing with pain. They were swelling fast, crooked, angry, wrong. She wrapped them in an old dish towel soaked in bleach. Her world shrank to the throb in her hand and the silence upstairs. No one came down. No one asked if she was okay. She waited. An hour passed, then 2. And finally, she understood. They weren't coming. Not with medicine, not with food, not with even a flicker of concern. Because this was normal to them. The most terrifying kind of silence is not when no one speaks. It's when pain happens and no one even flinches. That night, Lydia didn't cry out loud. She cried inward, the kind of cry that sits in your lungs and makes breathing feel like punishment. She whispered to herself just to hear a human voice. "Stay awake," she muttered. "Don't fall asleep. Not here." Because somehow, sleeping in that basement felt too much like giving up. So she stayed awake all night, not out of fear, but out of fury. Lydia didn't scream anymore. She didn't beg. She didn't protest. Instead, she watched. It began with small things, quiet things, the kind of moments most people overlook, but not Lydia. She noticed her dad always left the house at 6:30 p.m. every Sunday. "Church board meeting," he said, grabbing his keys and cologne. But he never came back smelling like candles and prayer books. One evening, she followed him, on foot, from 2 blocks behind. He didn't go to church. He went to a truck yard. Old Marlin Road, where unmarked vans came and went, where men in boots whispered over boxes, where her father laughed too easily with people who never asked his name. And suddenly, church business had a very different meaning. Then there was her mother. Lydia noticed the field trip envelopes, the ones other kids handed in at school. Her mother worked part-time in the front office. She saw her open them when no one was looking, slide out a few bills, fold them, tuck them into her purse. "Just covering what the district won't," she whispered once, as if justifying it to herself. But Lydia knew better. That wasn't covering. That was stealing from kids whose parents already couldn't afford the trip. And Cassidy was a saint online, smiling in videos about family values, posting fake charity drives, talking about how grateful she was for her supportive home. Supportive, Lydia scoffed. Cassidy hadn't even flinched when her hand was crushed, hadn't looked away, hadn't blinked. The more Lydia stayed silent, the more she saw everything. Pain had turned her eyes into a camera, and she was done blinking. Silence didn't make Lydia weak, it made her sharper. While Cassidy chased followers online and her parents chased lies in the dark, Lydia studied the one thing they all feared: truth. She started spending hours after school in the library, but not reading fairy tales. She read about sound engineering, light design, stage equipment, and recording tech. She learned how microphones picked up whispers from across the room. She learned how to splice audio so it couldn't be traced. She learned where to hide a recorder so it sounded like nothing was ever there. And she did it all without saying a word. At the school theater club, she signed up to run the backstage lights, the job no one wanted. But while others memorized lines, Lydia memorized wiring diagrams, audio frequencies, and the echo of guilt in someone's voice. She didn't need to scream. She just needed the right frequency to amplify the truth. While her family thought she was staying late for extra credit, she was learning how to build a fortress out of facts. She learned that silence, when armed with knowledge, isn't helpless, it's deadly. The dog shelter smelled like wet fur and bleach. To most people, it was chaos, barking, scratching, but to Lydia, it was peace. Dogs didn't lie. They didn't ask questions they didn't care about. They just wanted to be fed and not kicked. Lydia related to that more than she ever admitted. Donna ran the place like a military base, brisk, no nonsense, always 5 steps ahead. She was in her 60s, wore thick-soled shoes, and had eyes that looked like they'd seen war. Lydia liked that. It meant Donna wouldn't flinch. One Saturday afternoon, as Lydia reached for a bin of dirty food bowls, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from cold and a year-old injury that had never healed right. Donna saw it. She didn't gasp. She didn't reach out. She didn't demand answers. She just looked Lydia in the eye and said low and steady, "Family like that, huh? I get it." Then she turned, walked into her office, and came back with a manila folder. "You didn't ask," she said, "but I see everything." Lydia opened it slowly. Inside, emancipation paperwork, housing options, a list of 3 women with first names only. Call if you ever need to run, no questions asked. No dramatic music, no speeches, just paper. Options, a way out. Lydia didn't cry. She couldn't. Tears were a luxury in houses like hers. But in that moment, for the first time in years, she felt something close to hope. Lydia took the folder home in her backpack. She didn't open it again that day. She didn't dare. She hid it behind the loose panel in the back of her closet, the place where no one ever looked. Not because it was a secret, but because it was a promise. Inside were 3 things: an emancipation form, the legal escape route from parents who should have protected her, a housing referral list, shelters, host homes, programs that didn't ask questions, just gave keys, a hotline card, folded 3 times, edges worn, with 3 names written in pen. Call if you ever need out. We've been there. Lydia didn't cry. She held the folder in her hands like it was made of glass and fire, something fragile but powerful. Something she couldn't use just yet, but would, someday. Donna didn't give her a speech. She didn't say, "Be strong." She didn't promise it would get better. She just looked Lydia in the eye and said, "You didn't ask, but I see everything." And somehow that meant more than any rescue ever could. Because for the first time, Lydia realized she wasn't invisible. Not here, not to Donna. So she nodded just once, not as a thank you, but as a vow. It looked like any other night. Dad was yelling at the TV, Cassidy was laughing at her phone, Mom was counting bake sale money with one eye on the clock. But Lydia knew tonight was different. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, battered mic pack scavenged from the radio station where she volunteered. It was barely the size of a candy bar, but it was powerful. Auto-record, time-triggered, encrypted storage. She'd reprogrammed it to activate exactly at 7 p.m. It would run for 45 minutes, then upload the file to a private cloud drive she created under a fake name. She slid it under the recliner, where Dad always sat, tucked into the fabric crease where it couldn't be seen, couldn't be touched. And then she waited. That night, the house played its usual horror show. The first recording caught her mother counting envelopes from school. "So what I skim $5 here, 10 there? What kid's gonna notice? Half of them owe lunch money anyway." Click. The second file, Cassidy, laughing. "Honestly, Kayla's so fat, she should pay double for her cheer uniform. I told her that to her face. Like, do some squats, babe." Click. And then, her father, drunk, slurring, talking to himself, not realizing anyone could hear. "That girl, Lydia, she's not right. I should have broken her face the night she talked back." Silence. Then more laughter, more venom. And Lydia, she just listened. She didn't flinch, she didn't cry, she pressed save. Because now, the house was finally telling the truth. She didn't shout, she didn't call the police, she didn't even confront them. She just uploaded an episode, one single episode, titled The Leftover Daughter. Lydia recorded it in the school's radio booth on a Saturday afternoon, the place she'd once learned to adjust sound levels and hide her shaking hands under the desk. This time, her voice didn't shake. No names, no locations, no direct accusations, just her story. The bread on the plate, the hammer, the basement, the silence. The years of being invisible until she became the one with the power to listen and record. It wasn't rage, it was control, it was precision. It was truth, and truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be heard. By the time Lydia got home, the podcast had 2,000 downloads. By morning, 10,000. Then TikTok found it. One line got clipped and looped over and over. When you break a child's fingers, she learns how to type her own truth. That sentence exploded. Influencers quoted it, survivors stitched it, therapists reposted it. And Lydia's family? They had no idea it was her. But one by one, their worlds began to crumble. Cassidy lost 2 brand deals. Her mother was asked to step down from the PTA. Her father was temporarily removed from the church board. None of them could trace it. They blamed cancel culture. They blamed haters. But the truth was sitting in Lydia's backpack the whole time. Quiet, clean, undeniable. It started small. First, Cassidy's influencer income dried up. No more discount codes. No more sponsors. No more family goals posts with a fresh dinner and a fake smile. Then came the whispers at church. People had heard the podcast. No names were mentioned, but the shoes fit, and the congregation noticed. Lydia's father was politely asked to step away from church duties. A temporary leave, they called it. But the truth? He'd been exposed. Then came the envelopes. Not the kind with birthday cards, the kind with bold letters and legal threats. Final notice. Payment overdue. Foreclosure pending. They had missed too many mortgage payments. The house, the one that once locked Lydia in its basement like a secret, was now up for auction. And the best part? They had no idea she was watching. Lydia didn't laugh. She didn't celebrate. She researched. She remembered what Donna once told her about a nonprofit grant for youth in transition, for kids like her who had survived. Lydia sent in the podcast, her story. Within 48 hours, they called back. You qualify, fully. The same house that once trapped her was now affordable, not because she got lucky, but because she planned for this moment. They were losing everything. And Lydia, she was just getting started. Closing day was a Tuesday. The sky was gray like it knew. Lydia zipped her hoodie tight, tucked the signed contract under her arm, and walked up the rotting front porch of the house that once called her a ghost. The realtor didn't recognize her. Why would he? To him, she was just another grant-approved buyer with a steady part-time job and no criminal record. To her, this was the battlefield. She stepped inside to inspect the property. The same creaking floorboards, the same chipped paint, the same hallway where her screams had once gone unanswered. And then, outside, the chaos she'd been waiting for. Her family, on the front lawn, cardboard boxes. Cassidy yelling into her phone. Her father, red-faced and sweating. her mother crying. They weren't moving out, they were being moved out. Foreclosure, bank order, no extensions. They still didn't know, not until Lydia walked past them, calm, steady, holding the keys. Cassidy froze. "What are you doing here?" Their dad turned his mouth, already forming an insult, but it never came. Because Lydia looked him dead in the eye and said, "I told you I'd have a bigger table someday. Today, I built it myself." And with that, she walked through the front door, not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as the new owner. 3 days after closing, Lydia hosted her first dinner. No fancy invitations, no long speeches, just a handwritten note taped to a shelter bulletin board. "Dinner at my place. Real food, real people. If you ever sat in silence, this table is for you." And they came. Donna arrived first, carrying a pie and pretending not to tear up when she saw the front door open for her. Then came the girls from the shelter, the ones who used to sleep 2 feet away from Lydia on thin mattresses and whispered dreams at midnight. And finally, her old weekend boss from the radio station, the one who never asked about her bruised hands but always let her work the soundboard anyway. The table wasn't big, but it was hers. Real wood, polished, bought with her own money. And on each plate, a perfectly seared steak, medium rare, butter melted, served with mashed potatoes and grilled asparagus. Not scraps, not silence, not shame. As she handed Donna the final plate, the room was filled with laughter and warmth, sounds that never existed in this house before. Cassidy used to say Lydia didn't deserve steak. Their father used to eat hers and call it father's tax. But now Lydia served every guest with both hands, crooked fingers and all, because this time she chose who sat at the table. After the plates were cleared, after the laughter had faded into soft conversation, Lydia stood quietly and returned to the table. She placed 3 items at the center: a worn-out cassette recorder still holding the whispers and confessions of a broken household, an old X-ray image, the bones of her hand bent at impossible angles, frozen proof that pain had once lived here, and finally, a small engraved nameplate, Lydia Holloway, survivor, not servant. The room went still. Donna looked up, eyes softer than usual. "Why did you come back here, Lydia?" Lydia didn't answer right away. She touched the edge of the X-ray with 2 fingers, then looked around at the walls that once trapped her, the door that once slammed behind her, and now, the table she had built. Then she smiled. Because this place used to be a prison, but now, the key belongs to me. And just like that, the story flipped. The girl they tried to silence, she didn't just survive. She took the house, the table, the silence, and rewrote the ending, on her terms. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It can be the training ground for strength. Lydia's story teaches us that surviving isn't weakness, it's strategy. Sometimes the quietest people carry the sharpest truth. While others scream to be seen, survivors like Lydia observe, endure, learn, and rise. Your pain does not disqualify you. It prepares you. No matter where you came from or how many times you were silenced, you have the power to reclaim your story, build your own table, and choose who gets a seat at it. If Lydia's story moved you even just a little, don't let it stop here. There are thousands of voices still locked in silence. Let's build a world where they're heard. Subscribe to Athena Stories to hear more powerful, untold stories of resilience, courage, and quiet triumph. Because sometimes the softest voice carries the loudest truth.